Hi, trade professionals. Welcome to another news roundup by Simply Trade Podcast. I'm Annik, and I'm here with Lalo and Andy, who are gonna enlighten us today on some new topics we got from this week. Very exciting things that I picked out. Not sure if they're excited or if these are very easy to them or hard or whatever, but we'll see what we get from them, right? So we are going to jump right in with EV batteries. So the article says EV battery imports face scrutiny under US law on Chinese forced labor. Funny because last week we didn't have China in here, and I thought we needed to get China back into our news roundup because we missed it so much. Uh, so I want to know your opinions on this. We have talked about forced labor lots, but will this affect a lot of businesses here as the rise of electric vehicles are currently happening, I would say? And do you think there was or is a high risk of scrutiny in this industry as the article describes it to be?
Well, I'll jump in on it right off the bat. Good morning, everybody. Anyway, what's happening is the forced labor prevention legislation, not only in the U.S. but other locations. But U.S. is obviously the enforcement's coming into play here, and they're focusing in on EVs in this case, electric vehicles, and with that, there are components that are manufactured. Excuse me, there are components manufactured in the northwest quadrant of China, in the Uighur section here, apparently, that the U.S. is focusing on. So you can have in this case, an EV that's manufactured in other parts of China or other parts of the world, for that matter, that are getting put together, assembled, all that. But then they're zeroing in on some of the components that are manufactured from that Uyghur location. And as such, the whole finished product then is wound up being detained and or seized or rejected into being able to be imported into the U.S. So the scenario again is the effort to push back against forced labor in the manufacturing of whatever widgets, in this case EVs, is coming into play as the U.S. ups its enforcement on this. And so that's basically what's happening here is, again, you look at your supply chain. So folks, even if you're not in the automotive industry, and obviously EVs are a big deal as we're moving down the road here. But it could be anything. It could be, gasoline or petro powered vehicles. It could be widgets of any kind. You need to look at your supply chain and consider, are there any components of your items that may be made with forced labor? It is a laborious task to try and find out all these things. Um, but it's something that has to be done because of the new laws and regulations that are out there. So, yeah, enforcement is being ramped up. That's for sure.
And there's tools you can use for that, correct?
Yeah, well, interesting enough when you say that. Other than what Andy said, I mean, there's not much to add other than, in my opinion, that of course, we've been talking about this a lot. But the only thing I want to add, based on your question, Annick, is that coming in about a week or so, maybe 2 weeks, we are going to release a series of, and I know I hope people don't think this was scripted because it was, and we don't see the stories that you pick until the day, like a few hours before we record. So anyway, um, and we don't influence them for you either. You just pick
They
them.
don't.
So the thing is, yeah, the only reason I'm saying that is we're promoting, I guess in this case, our forced labor series of shows. We have at least 5 different episodes that we're going to air. One with director of forced labor with a CBP, and then we're going to have people like Ana Hinojosa also recorded an episode, and attorneys, and then we're also going to have resources. So to your question, is there tools out there? Yes, there is. We have 2 software companies that are that we have an episode for that are telling us, how that you can do this and manage it. So yes, it in the simplest form, yes, but I'm sure, that there's so many details for it.
Hi everyone, are you loving our podcast? Do you feel like watching instead of just listening to our episodes? We have started to share our podcast videos on our trade community, www.crowd.trade, where you can view the complete show, comment, and carry conversations with your peers. We have built a trade community around our training courses and different resources for you to collaborate and gain the knowledge you are looking for. Head over to crowd.trade and register for your free account. Let's start trading.
Moving on to the second article. This has nothing to do with forced labor, but I guess I found this it's not really a news article, I would say, but I wanted to throw it in because it did seem beneficial to me, or maybe it could be beneficial to others. It says which factors can influence a country's balance of trade. So yes, I like the word balance because I think balance needs to be in life everywhere, but it's so hard to find balance, like in your personal life or exactly in trade. And it's so hard to make everyone happy or make everything right. So I just wanted to know what you guys think about this article and if you agree with most of it or if you want to add something, how to establish a country's balance of trade, and maybe things that we need to pay closer attention to now that we're reaching 2024. Do you think there's something that the industry needs to put more attention on now that we're moving into a new year? Like, I would think that with new things coming, I know I wanted to add on this article. I'm sorry. I wanted to bring it even further.
The article that you're talking about here, it is basically just describing what influences balance of trade. And balance of trade is obviously your exports versus your imports. And so in that the balance, you either have a trade deficit where you're importing more goods than you export, which is in the US is a huge trade deficit that way. Or you have a trade surplus, which you export more goods than you import. Either way, that's fine. The issue there, as far as what to look for, is I always come back as far as with the US. For every $1 billion of trade, and you've probably heard me say this before, every $1 billion of trade equates to 10,000 jobs. So when you import more goods than you export, that means that in your country, or in the US in this case, excuse me, there are more jobs associated with the importation than there are with the exportation. So the scenario there is that our economy in the US is so massive that we consume a great deal of commodities, and that's why countries from all over the world want to have access to the US market. In that, the issue whether you're importing or exporting more and all that in trade balance, I mean, we would love to see the US exports, which means US manufactured goods, be given more fair treatment or equal treatment, reciprocal, if you will, with some of the countries around the world. What that comes into is that that would influence us, yes, to where we still have to compete just like everybody else does on quality, cost, transportation, cycle times, all those kinds of things. But what we don't like is where US goods, when they're sent out, are hit with higher tariffs than what the reciprocal commodity coming into the US is hit with. I always come back to, for example, Germany, automobiles. A US manufactured automobile going into Germany gets hit with a 25% tariff rate, it's my understanding. A German manufactured automobile gets hit with 3.5% here into the US. It's not a fair deal.
I'm going more on a micro level now. I'm going more at the company, each individual company's level. What could they do to make themselves either more competitive or more efficient and stuff like that? I guess I just want to like zero down on that, and hope that the country does what they have to do, but you do your own part as well, and that's more. You talked about going into the new year. I mean, I know it's still a long time, Annik, but we still got 4 more months. But anyway, but let's just say, yeah, you plan the last 2 or 3 months of the year, kind of just to what's going to happen next year. I mean, like, look at your technology. We just talked about that. Look at what software you have, what like what and Andy's really good at this. Andy is super good at this, and going in there. And I mean, I know this is a shameless plug, but um, if you ever need someone to go in there and talk to management and talk to C-suite and look at where the inefficiencies are, that's where you need to look at. C-suite needs to be aware of what the hands on the the hands on the feet on the ground are doing, um, and vice versa. The people who are actually on the front lines need to communicate better to the C-suite. How are you going to make yourself more efficiently and everything? And so anyway, again, I know this is a shameless plug, but that's what we're here for anyway. We're in the podcast. Andy can go in there, evaluate that, break it down, give you a report, tell you exactly what needs to be fixed, and whether he does it or not. More often than not, no. Go look at the vendors, go look at your service providers, etc. That's where I think that's going to increase your competitiveness.
Okay, our last one is okay, WTO backs US in challenge of China's retaliatory tariff. I'm like, how many words can I get wrong? Okay, retaliatory. That sounds like a dinosauros though, or something like that. Retaliatory tariffs. Okay, my questions. Why? And I did not make any research ahead of this. I could make research and probably educate myself more, but I read the article, and if I don't know it, I come here because I am ready to, because I know either Andy or Lalo will explain it to me, and it's a little bit easier to understand than going through all the research. And what is this podcast for, even? This is exactly what it's for. So, okay, my questions. Why was this put into place, anyways? And now that it's, I guess, going back, like being backed up again now, that the exporters will be benefiting from it, do you think this was a correct choice, or where do you think this is going, or what is your opinion?
Is that when during the Trump administration back in 2018, this comes back in specifically talking about what's called the 232 tariffs. It's tariffs regarding the steel and aluminum products. And when the U.S. levied, additional tariffs on steel and aluminum products, it was across the board. China then implemented retaliatory tariffs against U.S. agricultural products, and they added another additional 25% in response to that. Then China filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization, or WTO, and said that that was not right or not fair, whatever. Apparently, the WTO looked at the case that the U.S. presented in defense of implementing the 232 tariffs, and basically sided with the U.S. on this particular case, that China's actions were not valid in retaliation for these tariffs. Saying that, I don't know the details of the case itself. In this particular case, it's this, both parties were looked at. Here's the thing that gets me: those tariffs were put in 5 years ago. The WTO is just now getting to look at this. So I would have to look at it and say probably China filed the complaint about maybe 4 years ago, 3 years at the worst. So it's taken them several years to evaluate this and then come back with their ruling. In this particular case, they've sided with the U.S. on this one. There's winners, there's losers, different things. Just because the WTO is saying, China, you need to remove those agricultural tariffs, if you will, or tariffs on those agricultural products, doesn't mean China will do it. It's up to them whether they want to do that or not, and all that. Same goes. All right. So now here's also one of the things we've just looked at. The U.S. The steel tariffs, steel and or the tariffs on steel and aluminum products. Man, I'm like, sorry. Um, the tariffs that were levied on steel and aluminum products apparently in 2022, January of 2022, EU steel and aluminum products, those tariffs were removed. A quota was put in, and so they come in duty free if the steel products and the aluminum products are solely manufactured in the EU. So taking the raw ore and then manufacturing the item, firing it up and all that, and melting it and making whatever the widget is. So there are quotas in there that were established. And long story short, basically it means that the EU has now had a trade agreement with that has allowed duty free products up until the quotas are filled. China still has steel and aluminum quotas assessed against it on any steel and aluminum that comes from China. So that's still in place.
Yeah, I was going to say almost what Andy said towards the end is that we just need to sit back and see if China is actually going to follow through and and levy those taxes, or not levy, lift those taxes. I'm sorry. And so, not taxes, tariffs. I'm sorry. So yeah, I don't know. There's really on a trade compliance aspect. I don't know what to offer other than, I guess, lucky you don't pay more tariffs. I guess if you bring it in, I guess it'll open up the market for all our ag products that were blocked by China. Not blocked, but where we got tariffs by China. So I know. Oh, some people may argue, okay, now more exports. Now we're going to have a shortage in the U.S. But I think that's the one thing that we have is an abundance of is agricultural products. So there's no way we're gonna see any increase in prices in pork or any of the other ag products.
I can tell. But you know what? That is also something. It would also be very interesting to hear from listeners what they say to this, because this is, I guess, it's a very controversial topic, and I'm sure no one wants to comment on this. But if someone wants to share an opinion, maybe it can even be very balanced. That would be great. Not even one sided. Just like Andy, maybe not, but maybe something that's like balanced.
No, I'd love to
If
listen
you
to
don't,
you.
I
I think
understand.
it's
No,
great.
it's not
If
bad.
any,
It's not bad. I don't think it's bad. I agree. You're in trade. I mean, what else are you gonna like? Of course, you want that. I think a lot of people in trade want that. Just like other industries really want something to happen for their industry because their industry is not very, I don't know, beneficial or working efficiently or having efficient rules or whatever. So I agree with you, but I'm just wondering what other people would say.
Well, I want to throw a little wrench in. Right. So let me tell you, let me throw a little bit of a little wrench in here. So I did research real quick. I did research as to why the heck would someone even have forced labor, right? So like in China, why are they even, how could they feel that they are doing the right thing. They feel that they are doing, again, you fight for what you think is correct, right? So I did a little research, and one of the reasons that they think that this is okay is because they are giving people in that region employment, where because otherwise they would be sitting around getting drunk and unemployed. That's their reasoning. But whether it's true or not, I don't know. I'm just trying to tell you. I mean, again, it's to your point, Annik, you're right. We fight for what we feel is correct, and there's always the other side of the coin, right? And yeah, we would like to hear that. There's a really cool episode that we're going to have next week with Dominic, and I forget how to pronounce his last name.
Veneziano.
But Veneziano. So listen to that next week. It's coming up here towards the end of this week. It's really cool episode. He was from the FDA, and Andy and him go back and forth on how they used to have healthy arguments, right? It's a cool interview.
Okay, fun fact real quick. I know you guys probably have a different person lined up, but so my fun fact, it's not a fun fact, it's actually a question. In 2021, which that's the latest one I could find, which country had the largest trade value in imports then exports of electric batteries? Going back to the first article. Do you know which country it is? Or could you guess?
Which country had the largest
trade value in imports than exports?
Well, that would be the U.S.
Yeah, correct. It's the U.S. with 11.5 billion, then Germany, but that's a big jump down. Germany with 5.27 billion, and then Hong Kong with 2.4. Yeah, so that's good news for the U.S.
Hong Kong's third? Really? That's fascinating. But look at how that went. So the U.S. is almost 12 billion, and then Germany is almost 6 billion. So it's like almost half as it goes down, and that tells you the massive size of our economy in putting things in perspective is how much the U.S. consumes. It's just phenomenal.
Well, thank you guys so much. I think we covered a lot. I didn't expect it to go that long. I actually thought it would be much shorter. And Lalo's looking at me like, we have a different guest. Just kidding. But thank you guys so much. And please let us know what you think. Give us your comments. If you just want to comment in private, you can email us. You can send us a private message. Do whatever you need to do. But we're so thankful for your support. And we will be back next week. Hopefully this made your Monday commute easier. Okay. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.